Hello everyone and welcome back to another segment of short reviews. This time is for May 2019. That month was insane. There were so many albums that came out this past month, and so this is why it's a bit late to make this video, but whatever. There were so many other albums that I wanted to talk about, but after a point I was like, I can't keep up with this anymore, I just have to do a short review about them. For those of you who are new to this segment, it's about those albums that I didn't feel all that much that I needed to do a full review out of them, or I didn't have that many things to say about them, and I decided to just give a brief explanation because out of all this you might find something to your liking. Some of these albums in my opinion are decent and deserve to be mentioned, others not all that much. This is going to be the longest segment of short reviews because we're talking about 20 releases, 19 albums and 1 EP. An EP that I was planning to do a short EP review out of it, but I decided to just throw it in this bunch. So with all that being said, let's just jump straight into these albums because we have a lot of things today. At first is this new album from Amon Amarth. Amon Amarth is one of those melodic death metal bands that have a decent discography. They have done some decent albums in the past, however their past releases just happen to sound exactly the same. There's not something that much different to them, and as a result it's your typical Amon Amarth sound, and I didn't really care all that much about this release. It was just forgettable. There are some decent parts, but not something all that refreshing, and this album is a 6 out of 10 for me. I couldn't really feel it, that album, all that much. Yeah, I don't really know a lot about the sound of Bad Religion, but I didn't like this album at all. And if all the albums in their discography actually go to that same phase, then I don't think I would even care to go for something even deeper. Because this one was not really all that special. I'm sure fans are going to love it. Me myself, that was a big no for me. That was a really bad album. I'm going to just give it a 4- out of 10. Boring, uninteresting and cheesy punk sound. That was an album I had lots of expectations for because I truly love the sound of Zamilska in some of her previous releases. Zamilska has a great sound of industrial techno with some more tribal elements and atmosphere to it. This album, however, goes to the more tribal sound and it doesn't really have something all that energetic, something all that exciting, which is not a bad thing for itself. This one just goes to a bit of a more dark ambient approach with more emphasis on just the more tribal sounds. The beats happen to be more minimal and not all that heavy. But still, the sound of this thing was really bland and at the end of the day it was just forgettable. Not a bad release, there are still some great songs out of this, but yeah, I was expecting something more from it. I'm just gonna give it a 6 out of 10. It was a disappointing one. The structure on this is really interesting and I like the more vintage modular sounds. James Ferraro started to be one of the first names of Vaporwave, and now with these releases he just goes to a more mature and different direction, and I like that. However, I still haven't found that something that would make me come back to his releases. At points it feels one-dimensional, repetitive, and even though I like the structure and what he did with the ideas with this thing, at the end of the day it's an album that just passed by as another forgettable James Ferraro release. But still I have hopes for something even better in the future because I actually do like the direction he's going with his sound, with a modular style of compositions giving also a feel of contemporary classical music, but there is still room for improvement in my opinion. And so this album is a 6+ out of 10. I think there are some good ideas, but I'm still hoping for something even more and a bit better fleshed out. The new Kampfar album has some solid riffs, there are some good moments, but it still doesn't have the sound, the pagan black metal sound that I really enjoyed to some of the previous releases from the band. I wouldn't even say it goes all that much to pagan black metal. It just gets to a more standard sound, but still some solid riffs, nice performances, and an overall decent album with decent production. It's a 6+ out of 10. I do not get the hype on this new Idle Hands debut. I mean, the EP that released the previous year was kinda decent, it was a nice combination of heavy and gothic metal. But this one, it's such a boring album. Even though there are some nice moments here and there, that's pretty much about it. It was a really boring and bland experience in my opinion, and I really don't get it how this album is really that much great to the genre. It's a really basic and generic heavy and gothic metal album, so yeah, this is just a 5 minus out of 10 for me. Another album I don't get the hype is of this new Slow Thigh album. Even for standards of UK hip hop, this was bland and boring. There were some refreshing elements to the sound that went to a more modern style of hip hop music. There is a sense of experimentation, it's not just your old school hip hop sound from the UK. It's just though that there's nothing all that crazy about this album, it's just decent in every factor. It has decent production, Slow Thigh's verse and his delivery is not something all that crazy for me, and it gets easily boring despite its short length. Yeah, I wasn't really feeling that album all that much. It's a 5 plus out of 10 for me. It's a mediocre hip hop release. No matter how much I get into slamming deathcore, I just can't find something to impress me. Yeah, the performances are excellent, the production is great, but I can't get into this album just with the previous one. But this sophomore album from Mental Cruelty, despite being really short, it's such a boring album. I get the appeal, I like the instrumentation, I like the vocals, but it's so one-dimensional, it gets boring really fast, and yeah, it's not easy to sit through the entire thing. Slam and deathcore still feel like a genre that you just put a song and just move on to something else. Listening to an entire slamming deathcore album is tough, even if it's really short. This is a 5 minus out of 10. In a sense, Anoyo feels better than Konoyo in my opinion. I feel that the drony and dark ambient side of this album feels a bit better executed. There is a very rich variety of multiple and different sounds, but despite going to all these different moods, it's still an ambient album that is bland and boring. And it's another release from Tim Hacker that I ended up not being that much of a fan of it as well. So yeah, it's 6 out of 10 for me. It's a decent album. That was an album I was highly anticipating, and it ended up being such a disappointment. Having 4 free improvisation and avant-garde musicians, you would expect something really good. From those names I was aware from Jim Jarmusch and Balazs Padi, and even that for me was enough. I don't know why I was expecting something more insane, something more energetic, and something that would just feel a chaos, something overly avant-garde and experimental. This one had barely any cohesion or in general all that much of an instrumentation. It felt empty for its most part, like there was just so much blank space where they could just add so many more things. Even for sort of ambient and drone standards, this got obnoxiously repetitive. And yeah, that was a disappointment. 5 minus out of 10 for me. I didn't really enjoy all that much this album. And yeah, I was at least expecting something more from it. Death and Vanilla is a Finnish psychedelic dream pop band that has released some decent albums over the years. This one it's a bit boring. There are some nice and chill moments here and there, but this one in particular didn't get all that much for me. It was forgettable and I didn't see myself coming back to it or to see me come back to it sooner. I will just stick to some of their previous albums. This one was just a 6 out of 10. I never was all that much of a big fan of Flying Lotus to begin with. Cosmogramma though is a good album. But still, this one not only was the most disappointing and the weakest album from Flying Lotus, this one is actually bad. At least with every single album he will put out, there will be lots and lots of songs and really short ones, but they will just feel like there would be some cohesion in between them, at least at some parts. This one though, it's a huge mess. This one was 27 songs, going for 66 minutes long, the longest album in his career, and that was easily one of the most boring albums I've heard all year. Mostly the tracks that were instrumentals felt really empty. Like in those tracks, I would just prefer them to have a feature, something to just add up to the monotony and the emptiness of the songs. And on other ones where there were features, they actually felt like they were sort of ruining the experience or that they wouldn't fit all that much with those specific bits. And that this album Flying Lotus seemed like he tried so hard to just make an instrumental that would feel appealing to the sound of the particular artist that they would just feature on these songs. But most of the times it didn't really work. One of my favorite moments had to be the Black Balloon surprise with Denzel Curry. I think that with his first he killed it on this song. On other occasions there was this one with Tierra Wag, which this had to be my least favorite song out of the album. That was really bad. Like, not only was Tierra Wag sounding really kooky and silly and awkward of this song, but this beat was trash. So many fillers on this album did not need to be 27 tracks, and even for someone who is not that much of a huge fan from some of the previous Fly Low works, that was still a huge disappointment. This album was really boring. I'm just going to give it a 4 out of 10. This album from drum and bass producer Prolix started really promising. There were some really solid tracks, but in my opinion, this one ended up being bigger than what I would like it to. There were some tracks that felt really short, and in my opinion he could just drag them even more and just cut some others that were a bit unnecessary. Overall though, decent features and a solid album in terms of production, especially if you're looking for something that is close to the sound of Black Sun Empire or State of Mind, and Black Sun Empire are actually featured in 2 of the songs of this album. Yeah, go and give this one a listen. It's a decent drum and bass release. It's a 6 plus out of 10 for me. Another album that felt so empty, like so empty, and it ended up being really boring. Not that much to the instrumentation, really simplistic with just guitar and drums, but still pretty much nothing special to it other than just some decent melodies. But the whole feel from the Sound of Earth, it was not in this album like whatsoever. Really forgettable, just a 5 minus out of 10 from me. Apparently Ramle, who were known for making some of the first death industrial and power electronics albums, actually ended up with their last releases to go into an avant-garde psychedelic rock sound with elements of just noise and noise rock, which is something that happens with this album as well. This is also direction that Controlled Bleeding took with their previous efforts. And this one, while I like the minimalism to it, there are some solid melodies and I like the aggressive noise sections to some of these songs. It was unnecessarily long. Some of the tracks would just drag and keep going on and on and on. And in general, that was a really long album, and it ended up being really boring and forgettable for its most part, and it ends up leaving me to just give this a 5 plus out of 10. This EP from Miley Cyrus is possibly the best thing she has done so far. Miley Cyrus has gone through lots of different phases with her music, from going to your basic average teen pop sound to a far more edgy commercial pop sound, and then shifting it to country pop, and then ending up just releasing a safe pop EP, which it's cute, there are some catchy moments, it's decent, and in my opinion it's a sound that we haven't heard all that much from Miley, and it fits the best for her in my opinion. Though don't get me wrong, this thing is still edgy as fuck, and some of those features might feel a bit disconnected, but they were still decent. Overall, it's a mess of an EP, nothing all that special, but still that was at least tolerable in comparison to some of the previous things she has done. So yeah, this is a 6 out of 10. Not that bad of an EP in my opinion, there were some okay moments to it. If you're looking for another sort of old school hard hitting hip hop album, Onyx still got it. Onyx have released lots of albums over the past years, and this one is pretty much the same with the previous ones. Nothing changes all that much, but it doesn't need to. It still has the aggression and just the nasty verses from the two members of Onyx, and lots of different features that fit and work really well with the context of this short album. So yeah, this is another decent Onyx release. It's a 6 out of 10. Yeah, this is possibly the weakest album from She Passed Away. In this one, it seems like they get a bit more away from the rock and post-punk sound from their previous two albums, and in this one it goes more to a bit synthy and dark wave sound, and it's not a bad thing, but it doesn't really work all that well for them. It's basic, it's forgettable, nothing all that special. Yeah, that was a bit of a disappointing release from She Passed Away. It's just a 6 out of 10 for me. As the album title says, Chase's Status returned to some more old school and jungle drum and bass vibes with this album, with tons of Jamaican features just to keep the vibe, and in my opinion they did a decent job with this one. But still, this sort of basic and commercial sound from Chase's Status is still apparent over here, and it's another one of those releases from them that still doesn't manage to impress me all that much. It's still though a decent album for just going back to the roots where the thing started actually. So yeah, it's a 6 out of 10 for me, but not something really all that special from Chase's Status. From just the general attacks of this thing, bubblegum bass, emo rap, deconstructed club, vocal trance, electropop, trap rap in general, even though it sounds like a great combination to my ears, I was worried that this was just going to be a huge mess. And that's exactly what this thing is. 23 minutes of an album that was actually hard to sit through. Such a mess of different sounds that did not feel connected at all. It's like I'm listening to Girlfriend of the Year or some of the generic compilations of PC music combined to a more aggressive side that sounds like nu metal or crankcore. Hopefully we're not going to have more things like this in the future, or just at least have something that feels more of a cohesive thing, or just being messy but actually being good. Have a bit of a connection or something, because this thing just doesn't sound good at all. 4 minus out of 10 for me. Another album that I don't really get a hype. And that was it. That was all the albums I wanted to mention in this segment of May 2019. What's your opinion on these albums? Like them, dislike them, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.